Reverend Chris has asked me to think about the sacraments in our non-subscribing tradition, and as with most of the Reformed tradition, we hold two sacraments, baptism and the Lord's Supper. And in our tradition, generally speaking, these are administered by a minister. Only a minister can really conduct these services. And that's quite interesting, I think, because ordination itself is not considered a sacrament. And we're very fortunate to have a fairly detailed account of the ordination of James Martineau, which took place in Dublin in 1829, in which the non-subscribing ministers of that time, and particularly of the Dublin congregations, give us quite a lot of insight into their attitude to ordination, which they describe really as signifying that someone is considered competent to act as a minister. And that is the real significance of the service itself, and it's done through the laying on of hands. But the significance of this is really to show that the person concerned is now considered trained and competent to serve a congregation as a minister. And that publication about Martineau's ordination also lays great emphasis on the democratic nature of Presbyterian governance and on the fact that the minister is a servant of the congregation. And so in serving the congregation, the minister performs the two sacraments. And our tradition, if we look at our directory of worship, we find that our tradition lays great emphasis again on mystery, on the mystical nature of what is happening at these sacraments, and also on openness. And here we're reminded of the universality of non-subscribing theology, the idea that God's grace is openly acceptable to all. And this gives particular significance to the nature of the sacraments in a non-subscribing tradition. In baptism, baptism is described as setting a seal on grace that is taking place internally in the hearts of people, in the hearts of the parents who bring a child for baptism, or in the heart of an adult who is being presented for baptism. And while a minister is generally required to perform the service, our tradition allows of the possibility for pastoral, when pastoral circumstances may mean that a baptism must be conducted by someone other than a minister. And also an interesting factor in our approach to baptism is that while baptism is considered as important, of course, and it shouldn't be delayed, it should be conducted as quickly as possible, should a person, through no fault of their own, not be baptised, our tradition does not rule out the prospect of God's grace for that individual. And that again relates to this idea of universal salvation. Baptism, while it is important and while it is sacramental, may not necessarily be absolutely essential to assuring salvation. And so that's a very, very important key element in our tradition. In terms of the Lord's Supper, we emphasise the openness of the table. Everyone who wishes to partake in the Lord's Supper is welcome to do so in our tradition. And so it sometimes surprises me when I hear people express within our tradition that they don't come to communion because they don't feel that they are good enough, that they're entitled. In our tradition, we're reminded very strongly that we go to communion not because we are good, but because we are in need of God's grace. We're in need of transformation, of redemption and salvation. And that is why we attend the Lord's Supper. And the Lord's Supper is a memorial, of course, of Christ's sacrifice for us. But it is also described in our directory of worship as a reflection of the mystical union between ourselves and Jesus, and between ourselves as a congregation. And so the minister's role as servant to the congregation in our sacraments reminds us about the nature of the church. The church may well be a beautiful building to which we love to go and join together in services, but essentially the church is ourselves. We are the church, and our sacraments remind us of this as we participate in them together.